Welcome everyone to another episode of the Legal Lunch Byte. Today I'm joined by Pete Mikhjian from Supply Chain Resources Group in North Carolina. We're talking today about optimizing international supply chains. Pete, thanks for joining me today.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. Happy to be here.
So let's talk about supply chains from your background first, please. Tell us who you are, what your background is, and particularly what SCRG does for companies in managing their supply chains.
Sure. So I've been in manufacturing for about 20 years or so, and about half of that duration focused on international manufacturing with contract manufacturers and electronics manufacturing services industries. So it's been kind of part of my blood for, again, the past 20 years or so. For SCRG, we provide world-class engineering and operations talent to help our clients optimize complex supply chain and manufacturing challenges. So basically, we're enabling our partners to streamline operations, maximize efficiencies, conserve cash, essentially what we're doing is allowing our partners to fully leverage offshore manufacturing. That's the core of our business.
And I got exposed to SCRG through transaction, actually, through your one of your investors. And I got to learn about the business model, and it was one of my first private equity transactions, and it was very interesting because we were in multiple countries. I think we covered the time you had assets in 3, 4, maybe 5 different countries, and so we were looking at all of the all the contracts, all of the services, and really getting a read for what you do around the world. And I frankly, I was really impressed. I thought it was fantastic, and certainly providing a service. How many employees did you say that there are across the world managing, kind of being there on the ground, helping supply chain in the manufacturing sites?
So we're just under 350 some personnel. So we've been around for around 15 years or so. And those 350 personnel, it's quality engineers, it's program managers, it's tooling experts, it's buyers, it's planners. They have supported over 430 some products that we've helped, bring to life essentially. And we've got over 4,000 supplier partners that we actively work with and manage. So it's a big group. It's been growing like crazy. A lot of the growth has been India, Mexico, it's Cambodia, it's Philippines, it's Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia. It's been growing quite a bit. I think a lot of the big picture in terms of manufacturing is this China plus one strategy. That's how we're seeing a lot of these companies, ensure resiliency.
And I think during COVID, that's really everyone kind of got taken aback by what we saw during COVID, right? With China just being able to shut down the ports, shut down everything in the name of state security to make sure that people wouldn't be dying on the docks. Just so much, and in the factories, right? I think we were all just kind of shocked. And then, of course, you have the shipping costs that went up by 3-4x during that time. So it just everyone was dealing with all of these issues and thinking, my supply chain is riddled with risk now, and it was before, but nobody really, we hadn't stress tested yet, right? And COVID was a big stress test.
Yep. If we're seeing companies that they're focusing on reducing supply chain risk, and it's reshoring, it's nearshoring, it's utilizing multiple vendors for the same components. It's having those vendors be located in different regions, and ensuring even that the sub supply chains aren't coming from the same region either. If you go back 10, 15, 20 years ago, the trend was to outsource your supply chain and consolidate. That way your spend and your leverage is through the roof, and you're basically reducing costs. The pandemic and geopolitical tensions, really, they've made everyone second guess that strategy. And now we're seeing pretty much the opposite. Clients still want to outsource, but they'd rather pay for that diversification to ensure the continuity of their products and their supply chain. That's what we're seeing.
And small and medium-sized companies especially are having a very hard time retooling their supply chains. They just don't have the in-house expertise to tackle 4 or 5 new countries to develop redundant suppliers and going, like you said, going multiple layers deep into the supply chain.
Yep, you got it. You got it. It's, I mean, whether it's a small company, medium-sized company, large, big blue chip, startup companies, all the way to established for 20-some year, 30-some year companies, they're all trying to get their hands around supply chain and understand how to diversify that risk, understand how to reduce costs where you can, and ensure that continuity of their product so they can actually have something to sell to their end clients.
Sure. So let's talk for a minute about regions before we dive into specific countries. So what are you seeing in terms of regions? What up and coming? I'm always curious about, we hear about Southeast Asia, certainly, India, South Asia, countries. I'm just curious, who are some of the front runners right now in terms of countries, maybe expertise, which countries or which regions are doing certain things well and which ones seem to be struggling to adapt to this new supply chain reality?
Yeah, if you look at China solely, I mean, the supply chain and the robustness of the components and the ease of transportation within the region, I mean, they're just so strong. It would be difficult for any major company to get away from China. What we're really seeing is China plus one. So they're saying we're going to stick with China for the core of our supply chain, but at the same time, we want to diversify that risk. We want to look at potentially Vietnam. Vietnam has limited infrastructure, but they've got a labor pool that's getting more and more in terms of skill set. Philippines, you've got some political instability there, but it's another up and coming area. India, they've definitely got a fragmented infrastructure, but there's ways to get around that, and that is growing like crazy as well. Mexico, same story. They've got some potential challenges, but a good area to grow and to support, the U.S. end market. So in terms of specific regions, it's China plus one. So we could say Vietnam, you say Philippines, India, and Mexico as well.
So you and I talked before we turned the camera on a little bit about comparing China to Mexico. I'd say that Mexico is very much a part of what we're focusing on. Just the nature of proximity, U.S. proximity to Mexico. We have native Spanish speakers at our firm, and so for us, I think that at the top of our list for a variety of reasons, not just because I'd say time difference, cultural affinity, shipping proximity, all of those things. Political risk. There are a lot of reasons why Latin America makes sense. But you mentioned, I thought it was interesting, that if people are going to Mexico solely for cost savings, they might be disappointed in that. Can you explain that a bit?
Right, you got it. We do have we're in China today. We want to expand to Mexico to save costs. And in reality, yes, you'll most likely save on logistics costs. But besides that, even with some tariff impacts, depending on the HTS code coming from China to the U.S. or coming from Mexico to the U.S., depending on if you're in a maquilador or not, your cost of labor is still higher in Mexico. Your available labor hours from a manufacturing standpoint is actually smaller than they are in China as well. And those couple of reasons typically end up showing us almost at parity or even more in terms of costs coming out of Mexico than coming from China. So the idea of going to Mexico for a cost savings is unlikely.
Yeah. So if it's just on cost alone, then they may not see the bottom line, depending on who in the company is evaluating whether or not it's a good decision, right? If it's just a financial decision versus factoring in the other, sometimes incalculable potential risks, depending on, we're talking political risk is a big part of my world, right? And thinking what political and regulatory risk, because those are things that are very difficult to quantify, but certainly are very realistic risks when you're looking at supply chains that are based, wholly in China. So let's talk about, I'm curious, talk a little more about the labor hours, because in Mexico, shorter working days, fewer people, is it kind of a people times hours quantification? What does that look like?
The first thing I think about are like the number of shifts available. So depending on, the region, it's either 2 shifts or 3 shifts. That's one. The other piece to it is typically in Mexico, it's, you're not working on Sundays. They just don't do that. Culturally, the China side, they're very involved with their work. They're very deep into the minutia. They put the hours in, and they working 7 days a week. I don't want to say that they like it, but I would say it's acceptable. So there's literally, if I have a P&L for China and a P&L for Mexico, and I'm building the exact same product, I'm going to have essentially better efficiency and better output from China, just due to the amount of hours available to do the work. It's very interesting.
It is very interesting, because I hadn't really considered, I haven't spent time working in a Chinese factory, so I don't know the working conditions, right? I don't know what the norm is for all of them, but that makes very good sense. So how do you see countries like Mexico moving? Let's say we take a Mexico or an India or Philippines or Vietnam. How do you see them moving, kind of coming into their own as they're stepping up to be the number 2 after China? What do you think their timeline might be? Let's say, how long is it going to take a Vietnam to absorb, kind of get maxed out, to accept as much business from China as possible? Maybe the same with India or Mexico.
So for me, part of my job was always deciding where a specific product should go, geographically. Should it be in China? Should it be in Mexico? Should it be in India? Should it be Vietnam? And then why? And when you look at some of the decisions that you typically look at before you can say, look, definitively, this is the right place to go to, and this is why. You look at the proximity to the HQ, or the proximity to where a lot of that labor team is essentially. Are you in the same time zone? Is it easy for you to communicate with them? Past that, I look at like skill set of the personnel that are there. Are we assembling something that's very complicated, over the top, or is it something that is very straightforward and simple and only has a few, components within their bill of materials? Those couple of things really start to help paint the picture of what the right facility is for you, where the right geography is. When I think about Mexico, it's definitely coming up like crazy. They're moving very quickly. The skill set is very high. In terms of the complexity of products, I'm thinking about some generators that I may have done in the past that are not necessarily generators, but they're 2,000 some components on the bill of materials. The product is the size of this hotel room essentially. Each one of those units is $1 million+. That is something really over the top, very complicated, laser alignment, super complex. That type of product I've personally seen being built in Mexico and not having an issue. If I move that to Vietnam, I don't think that it would not be the same in terms of output and efficiency, and even cost. It's just culturally, it's a little bit different. The skill sets are a little bit different. The demographics, they all would have an impact on the output of that specific product.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. And we've just got a minute or so left. Let's talk about infrastructure, because for me, I'm always fascinated with the idea of, when I really dig into the geography of a country, and whether they have navigable waterways, whether those their population centers are close to the coast or not, whether they actually have geography that permits them to have functional ports, whether those have to be dredged or whether the geography is just too impossible to do it. Something you don't see, even if you're looking at a world map, you don't really think about that. So let's just maybe some parting thoughts in terms of infrastructure development, how important that is in a country like India, and how far away they might be from really optimizing their natural geography to and then overlaying their infrastructure to really make it functional.
Yeah, that's a good point. So for India, super fragmented infrastructure. There's a lot of dirt roads, plain and simple, and that's definitively impacting the efficiency of the transportation. The way to get around that is to utilize multimodal transport solutions, but it's definitely going to have an impact on you. Going back to Mexico, if you're in Monterey or you're in Tijuana or you're in Juarez, there's very straightforward, simple access essentially to the U.S. border. And I'm just thinking about, that transportation, that trucking route it's simple, it's straightforward. It's been around for a long time. It's very developed. And, every 4 hours, essentially, there's a truck coming by to pick up goods from either of those different regions coming to the U.S. border. So it's very different in terms of the support level and the infrastructure buildup level.
Excellent. Well, Pete, we're at our time. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me today. It's fun to catch up and hear how things are moving, and certainly we'll keep an eye on SCRG and your work.
Cool. Great. Thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Thanks.